when the prophet Job lost his family, his words were, Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. The Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be God's name. And these have to be our words as we face the loss of our father and grandfather and brother and friend, Jerome Kimmelman. And we said, Adonai Natan, that the Lord gave us, Jerry, touched our lives, made the world a better place, a funnier place. And now Adonai Lakach, and now God has taken him from our midst. But because we were so privileged to have him as part of our lives, we say, thank you, God, with the words, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed be God's name for having lent him to us for these 91 years. This is a time in which Jews typically turn to the book of Psalms, and there we find the words, Esa Einai El Haharim, Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Yosei Shemayim Va'aretz. I lift up mine eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. Adonai Yishmar Tzeitcha Uvawecha Me'ata V'ad Olam. God will guard your soul, your going and your coming, now and forever. If you are able and would like to join me in the words of the 23rd Psalm, please feel free to do so. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He guideth my soul in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Adonai ma'adam v'tede'ehu, ben enosh v'tachashvehu. God, what are we that you have regard for us? And what are we that you are mindful of us? We're like a breath. Our days are as a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, and in the evening fades and withers. You cause us to revert to dust, saying, Return, O mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood where we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted, and behold, the upright, they shall have peace. God, you redeem the soul of your servants, and none who trust in you shall be desolate. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, it is written, L'chol zaman v'la'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim, et la'ledav v'et la'mut, et la'tad v'et la'kornetiyah. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And interestingly enough, this is just one of those moments which is both a time to keep silent, because when you're a mourner, you find it difficult to speak. And yet, what we know about mourning is you really talk your way through grief. So if I were to make a suggestion to all of you who come to pay a condolence call today, that you get the family to tell them about their father, about their grandfather and relative and friend. And if the other thing that you can do is you can tell them a Jerry story. Tell them how he touched your lives. And one of three things will happen, as I explained to the family. Either they'll say, oh, yeah, I knew that, or I forgot that, and thanks for reminding me, or they never knew it. And then they'll get a greater complete picture of Jerry. So this is a time about storytelling and telling the life of Jerome Kimmelman. And so I'm going to call upon his grandchildren first, and then some of his children, and then I will come back to you. So, Zara, where is she?
I'm not going to look at anyone. Papa really wanted us to come together. Those were like one of his last words. And he would have found this really beautiful. I have a joke to lead with, which is that I was briefly his favorite granddaughter. And he would tell me that. But we're just all so lucky to have had him all these years. 91 years. We're so lucky. And I think there are things we take for granted. Thank you. Like the fact that he sent all of us birthday cards and Hanukkah cards, and I took that for granted, but there was a lot of people to keep track of, and that was just beautiful, and luckily I saved some of them. We all looked forward to going to their house and having licorice, which I almost brought today, and candy jar, and so Benny made this pun to me. It was always a treat to be there. He was sharp and he was hilarious for 91 years. And he was also a living history. He had a lot to teach us about our ancestry, and I'm so happy we made a video with him telling the stories of his life and family. And that's all. I know he loved his grandchildren very much, and we're going to miss him greatly.
Thanks for going first, Sarah. My grandpa and I had an interesting connection from the very beginning because we shared the same birthday, March 26th. And in true Papa fashion, that means we heard the same joke every year. We have the same birthday. Why am I so much older than you? So probably inherited more of his sense of humor than I'd like to admit. I think we all did. But like Zara said, I think we all feel very lucky that we got a chance to know him for a long time, and that he was very involved in our lives from the very beginning. Some of my earliest memories of him have to do with sports, which was one of his great passions. He had the misfortune of being a lifelong Cleveland sports fan. But he would come to my Little League games. He would come to my JCC basketball games, drive from an hour away at any time and any day. And didn't care if I was the last one off the bench, which I usually was. Inherited a lot of things, but athletic ability, not so much. But he always watched so carefully, even if it was just a nothing, fourth grade basketball game, and always found something to notice and talk about afterward, diving for a loose ball or just a small little thing to build off of. It's one of the, earliest memories I have of him, and one of the last things we talked about too was that always hustle, always do what you can, always help the team, make the most of what you're given. And sports were a big part of his life, and he always related that to life in general. And he was really good about doing that with all of his interests. And he was really great about sharing those with us and getting those involved with us so we felt close to him, and expanding our interests too. Whether it was with sports or with playing cards, which he loved to do and was still beating me very soundly at age 90, which didn't always feel great. but also books, history, magazines, periodicals. Whenever I would go over there, like Zara said, it was always a really fun time. And he would have a stack of magazines waiting for us to read and catch up on, and then talk about world events or whatever it was from an early age, like 10 years old. I was like the only fifth grader with a copy of U.S. News and World Report in my backpack. So it was great to have, that kind of intellectual heritage as well. And a memory that stuck out to me earlier today is I got interested in chess around 4th or 5th grade, and that was never a big interest of his. He was a checkers guy, but he bought me a chess set and a book on chess, and he wanted to, if I was going to do it, learn as much about it and do as well as possible at it. So that's a really great part of him that he shared. And another one of the last things he said was a Winston Churchill quote, one of his shorter ones, thankfully. It's just never, never, never quit. And he said that in his hospital bed as he was dying, and he didn't quit. And that's something he lived his whole life and something I'll always remember. Thank you.
Jerry was my grandpa, and I love him very much. And he was very kind and nice and very hilarious. And he helped a lot of people, and he was a big part of my life and probably all of ours. We all love him. That's why we're here. We all honor him, and we all will miss him. He was very happy when he passed on. My dad told me he was eating an orange popsicle and enjoying life. He was happy, and we should enjoy life too. We all will miss him and love him very much because he was a big part in our life and helped us when we were in rough times. But we should be happy because he is too.
I wasn't planning to say anything, but then my daughter said something off the cuff, which I didn't expect. So, okay. That was a pleasant surprise. I didn't really expect any people to show up, so this is also a pleasant surprise. But one of the things I was talking to Zara about last night was this book that I read a few months ago called Contagious, and it has to do with branding, and it has to do with people influencing your life, having an impact on your life. And I know, my dad's not physically here, but it would, 91 years of being with him in one way or another, there's no question he has had the biggest impact on me. And consequently, who I am, how I feel, how I behave, how I treat people, what I do and what I don't do is with me. And I have that awareness, and I'm very at peace. And consequently, the way I behave and the knowledge that I've accumulated and or lack of knowledge will be transmitted to, Zoe and Mia, and consequently they would then transmit part of him to their children and so on. So like Mia said so beautifully, he would want us to be happy, joyful, enjoy today, and he is part of me. He is not spiritually dead in any way, manner, or form. So I just want everyone to know that, and I do appreciate everyone being here, and I hope he did have a positive impact on your lives the way he did have on our lives. He's my number one, I guess the buzzword now is influencer. People, trying to have people influence them. So I guess he was the one that influenced me the most. And that's all I want to say. And me is the reason why I spoke, because that caught me by. Right, my daughter's leading me now, which is fine.
see. As the eldest, I have some of the earliest memories of my dad. I lived in the same city with him for my first 35 years. And so I lived with him in the same city for 35 years, my first 35 years. And that's where clearly is when he influenced me and when I grew to love him. Many of my memories are sort of cemented in that time frame because he was so impactful to me. His parents came here in 1913. He was born in 26, got married in 1950, had me in 52, and in 53 his dad passed. So he was 27. He had an immigrant mother who looked great, but really wasn't savvy about business or America. And his dad passed at 55. Interestingly enough, his dad's brother passed at 55. So how things have changed. But Stephen mentioned influencer. He was without influencers. He had zero. The extended family wasn't there. He was on his own in America. And his one lucky break truly was meeting my mom. She was remarkable, had a lot of initiative, a lot of ambition. So they formed a partnership in terms of trying to create a better life for themselves and their kids. I was with them a lot, and I felt that journey. I truly felt it. I saw it, but I felt it. It was always done respectfully, but they always, were aiming to be better and get a better life. And ultimately, when we ended up in Beechwood, it's an affluent community. Some of it inherited, some of it made themselves. But for me, I always saw my dad as someone who entirely did it on his own. Just nobody there, him and my mom. And I had a lot of respect for that, and it definitely influenced me in terms of work ethic and how you go about life. My dad was probably a Jew first, American second. I'm guessing here, but he was remarkably patriotic. And when he joined the service, he told me it was the first time he'd ever met a Southerner, which was a big thing then. And he was stationed in the Philippines, not participated, but saw some atrocities that he described to me that were gruesome. At the end of the Philippines, the war was ending, thousands of GIs were shipped to Japan. And on the way there, Truman dropped the bombs, and he tells me it was like July 4th on that ship. They were just thrilled to not have to engage. And I think that he very much appreciated the U.S. for its treatment of Jews compared to other situations. And I think it reinforced his patriotism. And that lasted his whole life. People talk about family often, how the family comes first. And if you knew my dad, you knew that to be true. As a young kid, though, I remember, I'd say 2 out of 4 Sundays, maybe 3, we went and visited relatives. We went to my Aunt Annie, we went to the Stevens, we went to the Kimmelmans. There was no voting. You went. And I personally, I remember having to kiss elderly women with long dresses, glasses, hairstyles. And then years later, these women were like 72. Okay, that's nothing today. But it was his actions as much as words. Family was important and meaningful to him, and it became important to me and all of my brothers and sisters. He was a big sports guy, but and this is very personal, it's not even that big a deal, but rather than remembering like the Cavs games or Indians, and he was into all of it. I remember when we lived on Chelmsford, Mayfield Heights, he and I playing tag football with the father and son next door, listening to the Browns on the radio on a Sunday. And that, it just meant more to me than going to a Cavs game with him. He was a very, very giving guy, that's for sure. Let's see. We talk about unconditional love. It's a phrase, but personally for me, there were so many times he came through unexpectedly. In Mayfield Heights, a kid called me a kike, and we had a fight planned. He got wind of it. He calls the guy's father. Now, he doesn't know if the kid got the kike from the dad. He has no clue who this guy is. And he says, we're going to do it structured. I'm going to bring Mark over. They're going to fight in the backyard. I'm thinking, I might have had another plan B on this. Okay? But at the end of the day, the dad turned out to be a cool guy. Everyone made peace. And he married my sister. No. That's it. But I will say I was happy to get out of Mayfield Heights. No disrespect, but it was tough there. When I was 16, I went to Atlantic City Pop Festival. He drove me and a buddy of mine to Greyhound. Unbeknownst to him, we hitchhiked to Atlantic City. Now today, the only guy I know who hitchhikes, if you're familiar at all, is this guy Jack Reacher, if you know his books. Nobody hitchhikes. When I get there, and this might say more about me, but second day there, I'm in the Atlantic, and I'm a guy from Cleveland who hadn't been in the Atlantic Ocean that much. Second day there, I go swimming in jean cutoffs and realize my wallet was in my back pocket, no longer. So I call my dad, and he could be a very critical guy. He had high standards. And I'll just never forget how he did not admonish me. Wired money, have a great time. And it was meaningful. It was, I was expecting to get grief. Now, just an anecdote, a week later was another pop festival. And I had it. I was ready to go back to Beechwood, okay? And that was Woodstock. So I'm like the schmuck that passed on Woodstock. I don't lie and say I was there. I went home to Beechwood. When I moved to New York City, it was just a big deal for, a guy from Ohio. I remember first 6 months with my mouth open, the buildings, and it was a tough gig. And he was a constant cheerleader. For us kids. I mean, his advice was great, which he never took. But, and it almost became a cliche, because, it started in the 60s, and by the 2017, he's still giving the similar advice. But he was a cheerleader. And I go back to him not having a cheerleader other than my mom. And I felt very fortunate to have him in my life, just a constant source of support. It was time, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to miss him a lot. It's a tough thing at the moment, but and I know he had a good life, but we'll move forward and definitely think well of him. That's for sure. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, Mark, that was fantastic. That was really nice. I just want to say that I was so much like my dad. And when Mark left his wallet, I was the one that turned the lights off, cleaned everyone's plates. It was like really just get the name of the person you talked to on the phone. And it was just like my dad, very, very, just worried about things and trying to get things right. But I just want to say that my brother Stephen had this great vision of doing a video about my dad's life. And 4 volumes later, it's called Never Forget This, The Kimmelman Story. And we learned so much about our life. I mean, my dad was the narrator. He was interviewed. He just sat there and through boxes of stoic-looking women and all covered up to the later years where, everyone was carefree. My mom met my dad, and we saw the pictures of their vacations, and always with love. And, the whole theme of the video was his family escaping from discrimination and looking for each other and trying to find each other. And throughout it all, my dad didn't even know his father's birthday. I mean, they never really communicated a lot or talked a lot about the families like we do now. But we learned so much about my dad through that video about, his humble beginnings and about how he just met my mother and how he built, like Mark said, how he was like a self-made man. So I really appreciated everything about that. And, I love my dad so much and his sense of humor and just everything about him and how he was with my kids and his friends and his work ethic and always never give up and always there for advice. And I'm going to miss him like every day of my life, but he is in my heart. And I'm just so happy that he was my father. And that's all I have to say.
If I were smart, I would say amen and sit down. But I can't do that. Beth and Tom and Mark and Steve and Rob, his sister Shirley and Sydney, grandchildren Zara and Benjamin and Bradley and Elizabeth and David and Zoe and Mia and Hannah and Naomi and Ethan, and great-grandchildren Pedro and Sophia and friends. Now, I feel like I've known your father, your grandfather, your brother, your relative, your friend, Jerome Kimmelman, my entire career here in Cleveland. That's probably because I did. I came to the congregation, and the Kimmelmans were already part of it. I inherited that beautiful, charming English woman, Frances, along with her smiling husband, Jerry. I even got to do Tom and Beth's wedding. You have to see the picture, ask them to see the picture when they got married. Thanks, Tom, for sharing. 35 years ago, right? And I remember Rob in my confirmation class, and I was there, of course, when Frances died and did her funeral. So who was Jerome Kimmelman? This man who was born here in Cleveland to Ben and Rose Kimmelman. He had a sister, Shirley, with whom he was always very close. She still calls regularly asking for advice, and they talked on a regular schedule. He was a Glenville graduate who was always a hustler. Delivered newspapers when he was little, ran around selling magazines in the neighborhood. He was always that kind of wheeler dealer, as you told me. He was a salesman from the time he was young with that outward-going personality, a smile, and a wonderful sense of humor. As all of us who know him always had a joke. I was trying to think what would be the appropriate one for today, but always wanted to brighten up other people's lives. After graduation, he got drafted. As we heard, he went to the Philippines and was preparing to invade Japan when the United States dropped the bomb, as we heard. And he often remarked that he was glad that they did it because, firstly, he didn't have to go and fight in Japan. In fact, he went there and ended up being part of the mop-up team. He didn't say anything about him being a boxer in the service as well. He was that kind of guy who would challenge anyone, guys who were much bigger than him. But that's who he was. So he returns home, takes advantage of his GI Bill, goes to college for a while and works for various companies like Wonder Bread and Philip Morris, a furniture shop, and then he hooks up with a man who was selling insurance, and he learned the trade. Traveled the back roads of Ohio. He knew all the towns and highways well. He was selling insurance to farmers, and he was good at it. Good because of his personality and good because of his real concern for people and doing what was best for them. And they felt that they could trust him. Along the way, you didn't tell that story. He went to a dance at the JCC. He reluctantly went. He really didn't want to go that night. And there he met this gorgeous English woman who was visiting her sister. The two fell in love, and the physical distance and the age difference between them did not deter them. I love the story that you told me of his, this was way before cell phones, the little kids, the younger people won't understand that one. But before cell phones, if you can imagine standing in New York at the dock and not really knowing if the woman that you wanted to marry and propose to is really going to get off the ship. You weren't even sure she was on the ship. And then add to it, what number did she come off of the ship? Like last, you know. Can you imagine that feeling of standing there and so forth? But his heart leaped, and she was there. And Jerry never really lost that feeling for Frances all his life, all the 43 plus years that they were married. He provided for her and cared for her wonderfully. I still remember her dying years and his care for her and his love of her. They had lots of fun together as they socialized with all the various clubs that they belonged to, with the various trips they took. Some of them he won from work, and others like going to Israel or to the West Coast or Puerto Rico, to the Poconos where they used to love to go. Life was good for the two of them, and especially made so by their 4 children, Mark and Steve and Beth and Rob. You were his pride and his joy. You all admired his sense of hustle, that he was a hard worker, that he was the funniest guy that you knew, that he always had a joke, always making the waitresses feel glad that they waited on him at his table, especially at Yours Truly or Piccolo or Hoaz a long time ago when Jason's used to be in existence. What was his standard line to the waitresses was about that they're bagging up the plates and the salt and the pepper and the ketchup. And when they asked, what can we do for you? He said, can you get me a pill to make me younger and better looking? You admired that Jerry had lots of friends throughout his lifetime because he was a good friend to others. He was a lot of fun to be around. And also because part of Jerry's goal in life was to make others happy. And he did that for 17 years when he and Joan Miller went together. But so many of you remember those good times and the sharing and with his friends that we went out with on a regular basis. As we heard over and over and over again, he knew his sports facts. He loved the various Cleveland teams, followed them religiously. He was analytical and knew all the facts about all the players. As we heard, he was athletic, loved to play tennis, loved to go to sporting events. His grandchildren, you didn't tell the story of his taking you to the Indians games. Made you suffer through those? No, they were good. He used sports imagery as a motivational metaphor. He took his analytics to the card table as well. He was very good in cards and loved to play. You admired his love of reading, nonfiction books, loved history. As we heard, saved the magazines, give them to the grandchildren. We'll talk about them later. But back to you, his children and grandchildren and son-in-law. Each of you had your own special relationship with Dad. You have a lot of childhood memories where you knew he was there to support you by being at your sporting events. He was there to encourage you to reach your potential, there to give you advice, sometimes unsolicited advice, but advice nonetheless. And as we heard, unfortunately, there are times he didn't take his own advice too well. In fact, to admit it, he was overly stubborn. But this, we know that his actions spoke louder than words, and he showed that he loved each of you all the time in his own way. As was said to me, he was a sweet man with a caring heart. He was a guy's guy that was not overly demonstrative until, interestingly enough, as you told me here at the very end, and then maybe all that love that he had was expressed and that to everybody. I mean, nurses would walk in, I love you, and so forth. I even got a little of that love. You know that his family was important to him, and he would do anything to make your life happier. This was his goal, and he never forgot important dates and holidays, as we heard the grandchildren say. You knew that he supported you in every endeavor you engaged in. One of the things he did teach, and Rob mentioned it to me last night, he taught you to treat everybody fairly and to respect other people and who they were. He always rooted for the underdog. You loved his jokes, even though you heard him over and over and over again, but it was his ability to make people laugh and bring some humor into their lives, and even to remember the jokes. I mean, that's a talent in and of itself. And his timing that all of you talked about. I was touched as we talked about the relationship that he had with you, Tom. Another son to him, two road warriors that shared stories of rural towns, and the two of you were really dedicated to each other and cared for each other. We heard the words of the grandchildren, of their love and respect for their Grandpa Jerry. You were blessed with your father, grandfather, and even further blessed, as you indicated, that you had the foresight to record all the memories of his life and will be able to carry on all the good times. Now let that be a lesson to many of you who are sitting here. Notice how it touched them. If I could encourage you, then I would take Jerry's lessons to you and say, go record your memories or go write them. Whatever you do, preserve them for the next generations to come. As you said to me, almost in the final words the other day, he was a good father. You know, and that's all that a man can ask, that his children and grandchildren say he was a good father, a good person. There's a friend of mine who wrote under the pen name of Sean Yettle, and he wrote the following poem. I thought it was appropriate for Jerry. It goes, I would hope I've done well, that my lifetime record shows me a giver, not a taker. Hopefully lightened hearts, created laughter and light, with effort sincere sought poor and ill, carrying their fight. If when I go, memory sparks a precious tender thought, wherein one recalls that I raised my hand and also fought. So if a home is happier 'cause I was there and tried, then friend, not only did I live, I never really died. This we know. And we say to Jerry, thank you. Thanks for making the world a happier and funnier one. Thanks for being the parent, grandparent, sibling, and friend that you were. And we say to you, like B'Shalom, go in peace for a job well done. Now, I know that some of you are sitting there and saying, but Rabbi, you didn't say this, you didn't say that. And that's what we can do in these next moments of silence. You can speak to Jerry and tell him of your thanks for his life and how he touched you. And so we pray silently. For Jerome Kimmelman's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues to the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more we give our thanks to God, and may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. And let us all say, Amen. We rise for the El Malay Rachamim. El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bamramim, Amsei Menucha Nechuna Tachat Kamfei HaShekhinah, Im Kedoshim Ataharim Kazohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Yosel Ben Beryl Varezel Shehalach La'olamo. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Jerome Kimmelman, the son of Ben and Rose Kimmelman, who has entered eternity. Baal harachamim yas tirehu b'sedek hanafav lo lamim v'yitzror bitzror hachayim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar Amen. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. You may be seated. This concludes our service. We will continue at the graveside and then return to the home of Stephen, which is at 10 Country Lane. And the family will be receiving today until 5 o'clock. And those who wish to contribute can contribute to the Jewish War Veterans Post 44 or to the charity of your choice.